Hi, I'm just going to capture, for people not familiar with processes, how we work from symptoms to bacteria to suggestions. Most medical literature is based on a diagnosis and they identify certain bacteria. Often for many different diagnoses, the same symptom shows up. When we apply citizen science to the lab which we have uploaded, we find that it seems that symptoms, if we have enough samples, are a better identifier for which bacteria are out of line. And I'm going to go through, I'm going to do it just with a reasonably conservative approach. I'm only going to identify the bacteria which are very strong of a certain nature. Okay, let's walk through and do it. So here is entered in by a person what he has reported. Here is a prediction, the ones which have the strongest association. And now all we're going to do is right click, open a new tab, and okay, the error message I had was because part of the information had not been updated fully. How it is, often the upload takes a fair amount of time, and sometimes part of the processing time's out. However, it's easy for you to do it. Just click here, update percentages, and it will go and take 15 to 30 seconds and complete the upload processing, which is what I did. So when we get back here, we have, that's back to the 20 here, we have the items, and I have this blank page. I'm going to open it again, and voila, now everything is good there. And usually at the very top would be things with checkbox. There are absolutely none. What we have is the secondary suggestions, which I'm going to check all those, which are not extremely strong. They are very strong, but they are not over a very conservative threshold. I'm trying, one of the dilemmas with the microbiome is you have 800 different species or taxonomy units, and you have to figure out which ones of those 800 are the ones you really want to adjust. Because you want to adjust the key ones, you don't want to be adjusting things that make no difference, or else you'll be chasing your tail for a while. Okay, so here we've done the free. We click here, create error profiles. It goes through and goes through all the things automatically. And we go through and voila, we now have it. And if you click here, you'll see what was suggested. Over here is a video explaining if you get absolutely no suggestions, whatever you need to do. And as you can see down below, we only have a few to avoid, and we have a bunch of things there. And that is likely because the amount of information which we know about each one of these is actually pretty small. And we are working only from clinical studies published on the U.S. National Library of Medicine. And if there is no data, there is no data. So that's the first one we've done. Now let's go back and try number 2, which is here. And there we go. And we click here and we go and click the ones which are secondary. There's no extremely strong one, which is interesting. Usually there, here we have a much bigger list of items. Now you can go and I'm going to skip his age, although he probably wouldn't mind changing his age. The risk is if I change it, I'm probably going to move him to an older age group. The cost of this type of thing is you often move up in a parent physiological age. So I'm not going to touch that one. I'm going to open this one here. And again, we have nothing, and we have 2 secondary choices. Step 2, see the suggestion. And in this case, we have 2 bacteria, and we have absolutely nothing. The things we can do later, but for the moment, let's assume we're just going to accept we don't have any information on how to modify these two bacteria, which is precisely what the issue is. Let's go back and to the next one. We have one automatically checked there. A specific bifidobacterium is too low. And there. I should make a side mention. Bifidobacterium, often if one specific one is seen as too low, it may be an unusual one. And I've noticed that sometimes a particular species shows up in low amounts of certain conditions. It's not that you're lacking bifidobacterium, it's that this particular one could be a spoiler, if you want, or a some indicator that something else is going on. Okay, so now we have everything there marked. See suggestions. You can now see the ones which is trying to modify and what we are doing for modification. And we got 2 more to go, so it won't take too long. Oops, I'm going to go back because there are some other ones which I forgot to flag. Okay, and so we are going to create that, go through, and let's go for the last one. Nothing there, and here we have the 2 which are there. We have lots of numbers over here, and you can actually go and hand select things you want besides that. But what we are trying to do is keep to the ones which have very high or very low values. This number indicates that their influence for the symptom is there, but probably it's weak, or it, as it says, it's very weak. Other cases it's strong, but the problem is that the percentile of the person and the cohort and 50% is normal. Is the importance of trying to shift it is really not there, because it's statistics that shows that it's important, but it's not clear what to do. You could try raising it a bit, but you're already at 50th percentile. Wherever you could try raising it, but the impact of raising it is probably going to be very small. So let's go on there. Although do we have a very small list, one of the smallest, and at this time we've gone through all of them. So what we do is we go over to here, and you'll see on the right we have a consensus suggestion. And then what that means is all the suggestions we have just created have been aggregated into one big source. Instead of going through each one, looking at the list, and the next one looking at the list, and how should I say it? Being data saturated, which is not good with somebody with long COVID brain fog. It sits there. So you can go in there and you can do things like list congestion suggestion, and you can see how many suggestions came from each one. You can see one just had 1, other had 8, one had 253. So that indicates how many things we had information about in terms of the bacteria we're dealing with. Some cases it's unfortunate we just don't have the information. And perhaps next month we will. I update the database at least once a month by reviewing all of the recent articles of interest on the U.S. National Library of Medicine. It's a fun job. Volunteers are welcome, but I don't think I could have any takers. Okay, so that shows you what the consensus is. If I wanted to start something again, I could hit clear and remove everything, but what I want to do is I want to view the consensus. And it now lists things which are have a unique characteristic. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to sort it by take count. And what we have is we ran 6 set of suggestions. 4 of the 6 suggestions came up with this particular item being a positive net result without a single study. Keyword, without a single study indicating that for any of the bacteria we're looking at, moving it in the wrong direction. In other words, these, based on all the evidence which we have, is probably the safest, keyword, and probably the likely thing to do. Some of them where you have a big number, you may have to go through, but only one set of suggestions have it. And it's sort of, we enter a lovely nasty area called judgment call, which is all of these have great impact, but they only have an impact in one particular thing. We see, lard. Okay. How often do you get eating lard as a suggestion? In fact, all of them are somewhat similar, and those are all probably coming from the one set of suggestions where we had a large number of samples. Safer tech, nope, nothing there. We have one thing is high protein diet, which somewhat is reflected in some things here. Pectin is there, and it's a 2, and sometimes apple will show it. Apples are full of pectin, so sometimes that will show up separately. The studies are looking, if they refer to something as pectin, it goes in a pectin. If it's apples, even though I know it's high in pectin, it goes in apples, and sometimes you get both of them showing up right next to each other, other times you don't. Okay, and then down the bottom we have the avoid things which are everything we know will push things in the wrong direction. We have 2s and 3s, mainly 2s. So we have a bunch of things there which are generally suggested to avoid. That again, it need to be discussed with your medical professional on it. And also in light of the other suggestions. So it is a bit of a balancing act. And then we have some risks, some avoid. Bifidobacter, inulin, grapes, which is largely resveratrol there. So it's there. What we have also is a download button. And the download button will allows you to save a file. I'm going to save it as Wales. And now we can go and open the file in Excel. Okay, I should explain a little bit about the numbers. We have the count, which is the number of these set of suggestions which it recommends avoid, and the number of suggestions it says to take. The weight here is not how much impact it had. It is a measure of the confidence we have. And let me explain it this way. For example, something like a Acrancia gum, we may have found exactly one study where it's mentioned, and the amount of shift we're wanting to do, and it impacts only one of the many bacteria we looked at. So the confidence is it going to cause a helpful change? Well, we have one study, we have only one bacteria impact, and the amount of bacteria shift we want you to do may be very small. So it ends up being a low value, which means, yes, it could help, but trying to convert it into a objective measurement, I don't think it's going to help much. Now down here we have something like animal-based diet. One's had a significant positive impact, one had a slight negative impact. Now it becomes a toss-up whether or not it's going to be helpful. Remember I was mentioning pectin on the list? What we saw on the pages was the top list and not necessarily complete. So we have apple showing up as a positive, never as a negative, which is good. And you can see different types of bacillus probiotics available there. In general, they are good. One isn't. So if you're trying to get a mixture, you may want to try to avoid this one. We have things like barley, which seems to be a very strong take. And we have no studies with the 0.02, and that's because in the positive studies, some of them were what's called a mixed bag. The net result is there was some residue being left over here. And we go down here and we can see next combination. Here is a interesting, certain bifidobacterium seems to be not necessarily advised. At least one of them is particularly not advised. This one here is another name for the same one, but it's mixed with Streptococcus fermentophis. At the same time, but the net result is negative. And you can go through here to the very bottom, and you have actually a list of 249 items, which you can go through and figure out which ones you're happy with, or you're in consultation with your MD is happy and what the benefit. I mean, hey, eating lots of wabase could be something which you particularly happy of, or eating lots of wheat bran or whey. So it's sitting there, and now it's a matter of having to make a judgment from the very limited information which we have going on in terms of what modified which bacteria, and whether or not we even know of anything that modified that bacteria. So that's basically how we walk through to get our samples here. So I'm going to shut up and get back to the finishing the blog post and getting this uploaded.